things continue to heat up in the Blair area of Cambridge. Actually, it's all of Cambridge. Who are we kidding? Over the development of a warehouse, probably an Amazon warehouse in the Blair area of the city. Residents of that area quite upset. Don't particularly, I think this is fair, want the warehouse in their area and have a number of different concerns. It was really put in place by a ministry zoning order, which is a legitimate tool, although one that I don't particularly agree with, but I get it. The Minister of Municipal Affairs very recently sent a letter off to Cambridge saying, we are concerned about public consultation on this. Not only public consultation, but consultation with the Indigenous community. The City of Cambridge has answered back with a couple of letters and some documentation to the Minister saying, we have done all our consultation. Joined this afternoon from the Mayor of the City of Cambridge and Catherine McGarry. I guess that's where we sit at this point, that you feel all these consultation requirements have been met.
Yes, Brian. Broccolini has met in August with Six Nations, and conversations are ongoing. And it's, the requirement for meaningful consultation and engagement of Indigenous. It is my understanding that Broccolini met with them. And it's important also to note that the core lands where the project will be situated have been zoned as M1 industrial since 2015, at which time extensive and substantive consultation took place. This project will have an economic impact on the region, and the project is environmentally sound.
It does in some ways look, Catherine, as if consultation was kind of done after the fact, though. Is that part of the problem?
In April 6, City Council was asked by Broccolini to endorse an application for an MZO to the province. And using the same process we did a year and a half ago, we did endorse unanimously as a council that decision. And so some of the conversation afterwards where the minister has been requesting other consultation, we've been able to address in the letter. And we're continuing to follow Minister Clark and outline, as we have on the November 22nd letter, all of our consultation to date.
Is it fair to say at this point, because looking through the documents, of course, they're written very bureaucratically, which I love, but is it fair to say that Six Nations has given its blessing on this?
The question?
Is it fair to say that Six Nations has given its blessing on this development?
It's fair to say that there's with Broccolini and that the requirement for meaningful consultation and engagement has been met. And Broccolini has assured the city that it will continue to have those conversations with our First Nations partners.
The citizens group that has been opposing this says it hasn't really had what it feels is meaningful consultation. Has the city gone far enough?
Blair Engaged have retained legal counsel, and that makes it difficult for us to engage freely and openly with the group. It is our understanding that the developer, Broccolini, has hosted a public meeting and had dialogue with near neighbors. The process from here forward is that the heritage impact assessment and the traffic impact assessment studies will be coming forward to a future council date, and delegations to that meeting will be welcomed at that time.
Is it your sense, Catherine, that there really can't be a decision that everyone's going to like here?
I'd like to say, Brian, that the exclusive jurisdiction over a minister's zoning order is with the minister himself. And it's also important to note that the core lands where the project will be situated have been zoned M1 already as industrial since 2015.
I guess there'll be a point, Catherine, where you can look back on this and kind of go, well, maybe we learned something out of this. Is that something that you would support down the road?
Do want to say that we are all on this journey together, and we are all learning all the time from any situation that comes forward. And the city takes its role in advancing the goal of reconciliation seriously. So we'll be recognizing the need to build stronger government-to-government relationships with the Indigenous communities based on mutual respect and trust. And I just wanted to point out again that this project is environmentally sound. It will have a positive economic impact on the region. And so we'll move forward there.
So what does the timeline look like going ahead, Catherine?
We will be waiting to see when we're having the site plan application, the heritage impact assessment, and the traffic impact studies coming towards council. And at that point, then everybody will be notified in the usual way, and delegations will be welcomed at that point. We don't have a date in mind, but it'll be coming soon.
I guess the next step really is waiting for a response from the Minister of Municipal Affairs, right?
Brian, you'll have to repeat that. Sorry, it just garbled a little bit there.
No, that's okay. Is the next step really to wait for the response from the Minister of Municipal Affairs?
Absolutely, it is.
And obviously the wheels of government sometimes turn slowly, but in this case, at least there's a deadline. So you expect to hear something, I would think, fairly quickly.
We complied with the request of the minister's letter, and we have put a letter back to him on November 22nd, respecting the deadline that he gave us of November 30th to update. And again, I wanted to point out that this is a minister's zoning order, and the jurisdiction or the responsibility for that legislation rests with the minister himself and no one else.
I'm assuming that it's something that you probably don't really want to address at this point, but do you think these ministry zoning orders are problematic in any way?
And I just wanted to point out this is a tool that's been available to any Minister of Municipal Affairs since the 1950s, and the decisions on minister zoning orders rest exclusive.
Catherine, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, take care now.
Catherine McGarry, Mayor of the City of Cambridge, this continues to boil. In speaking to some of the people from Blair Engaged, I think there is this kind of feeling that consultation came really after the fact, and they wonder if that's fair. The ministry zoning orders are problematic to me because it takes the decision making out of the local council hand. You can just say, well, it's up to them. It's up to them. And I don't think that's right. Yeah, but I also don't think there's a solution here to this particular battle that's going to make everybody happy. We are going to hear from the other side. Our Divya Gill has been in conversation with a lawyer for Blair Engaged. We will get to that conversation in just a minute. This is Kitchener Today on City News 570. We heard from Cambridge Mayor Catherine McGarry, such as it is, in the last little segment, but there is another group that is on the other side of this development fence, and that is Blair Engaged. And just let me check my notes here. We would like to give you the opportunity to hear an interview done by Divya Gill with the lawyer for that group, David Donnelly.
The City of Cambridge claims, quote, all consultation obligations have been met. You believe that's not happened. Am I correct in saying that?
Blair Engaged has written the minister to inform Minister Clark that not only have local residents not been consulted, their invitations or pleas for meetings have been refused. Furthermore, First Nations have also written the City of Cambridge and have stated in no uncertain terms that they have not been consulted.
So what does this all mean from a lawyer's perspective then?
Well, to me, given the long and very sad history of governments ignoring First Nations and the multiple Supreme Court of Canada decisions saying that there is a duty to consult and to accommodate First Nations, this is like a nightmare. This is the MZO from hell. I can't believe that people are actually considering preserving a minister's zoning order where there was no consultation with First Nations, and now they're considering allowing the MZO to stay in place and let the consultation happen later. That would set a terrible precedent.
So if the MZO isn't rescinded, what can the people of Blair do? I mean, is there anything they can do at that point?
Well, their first resort is to court. The minister, in his letter of October the 27th, and then further when asked in the legislature what the expectations were on the city of Cambridge with respect to consultation, he said that all residents needed to be consulted before you issued the MZO. That hasn't been done. So the problem with MZOs is that I think everyone agrees that First Nations need to be consulted before an MZO has been issued. But the key question that's never been asked, at least not in a court, is what are the obligations to consult local residents? Why are their interests any less inferior to anyone else's? If it's a good idea to consult First Nations, it should also be a good idea to consult residents because they're the ones that have made this biggest investment in their property. This is a huge facility. It's a 1 million square foot warehouse. It's a 1.2 million square foot parking lot. Nobody would want that next to their house. This is a historic hamlet called Blair, Ontario. This facility doesn't belong there.
So you all say like trust it has been broken. So how, in your perspective, how can that be restored?
Simply by rescinding the MZO. This was a terrible mistake on the part of Mayor McGarry and the council of the city of Cambridge. They didn't listen to local residents who told them that they hadn't been consulted, and they were also told that First Nations hadn't been consulted. The minister has been very responsible. He's told the city to go back and do the consultation. He's set a deadline of November the 30th. And now Mayor McGarry and the council has sent a letter essentially saying, don't listen to residents, don't listen to First Nations. We've done the consultation back in August and back in April, and that we're happy with it. Well, with respect, nobody's happy with the consultation that's occurred so far, and so the MZO must be rescinded.
So you did touch on the idea of meaningful consultation. Now, from your perspective, what does that look like, and what does the city of Cambridge already done in respects to meaningful consultation?
Well, I won't speak for First Nations, although they've been very clear in their letters that they don't think consultation has occurred and that it should. For the residents, the only consultation that occurred was that there was a meeting of council that was in closed session, and people were not given the opportunity to make deputations, to ask questions, to a number of reports weren't circulated. There wasn't a statutory public meeting as required by the Planning Act. There has been no right of appeal of residents. Basically, the city of Cambridge asked the governor of Ontario to skip over all the consultation processes. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, Cambridge planning staff, in their staff report, wrote that the purpose of asking for the MZO was to cut the public out of the process so that the developer wouldn't have to be bothered with public consultation. It's there in black and white. Residents have caught Cambridge Council red-handed. This MZO needs to be rescinded.
That is lawyer David Donnelly. He is working with the group Blair Engaged, which is against the establishment, perhaps no surprise to you, of a 1 million square foot warehouse in the Blair area, said to be an Amazon warehouse. Who else is building warehouses that big these days, right? And the discussion now is around public consultation, whether the use of the MZO to start with was the wrong decision. I believe these things should be worked out locally, even though they are difficult to do. And if we want to go back a few years to the things that I'm familiar with, one would be the establishment of the Costco on the west side of Waterloo. That gained a fair amount of traction from people who were concerned about the impacts of traffic, et cetera, et cetera. The eventual solution to that was the expansion of the roundabout at Urban Ira Needles, and then, of course, a second roundabout added further on to help control the traffic. But you go out there at the traditionally busy times of a Costco, which means any time prior to Christmas, and then the rest of the year, early in the morning, later in the afternoon, and you will see that it has a tremendous impact on traffic. Is it too much? Well, it's not too much for the people who decide to drive out to Costco all the time. And as other streets are finished in that area, that will change. But there was a big outcry And there was a similar outcry on the other side with people who were more than interested in having a Costco in that area of town. Traffic issues are always brought up in almost every development that comes before council. Sometimes they are very legitimate, and other times they're, well, a little bit wonky. But that's okay. People are, protecting, if I can put it this way, their turf. I just think there's been a mess here, and now Donnelly is clear on what he thinks should happen at this point. The MZO should be rescinded, and I think the City of Cambridge goes through the process again. Now, there is always opposition. Like I say, some of it is exceedingly legitimate, and other times it doesn't quite work. That is, unfortunately, that's what councillors get paid for, kids, is to deal with those particular issues. And sometimes you end up with people who are unhappy. If you go to the area of Waterloo at Fisher Hallman and Columbia, there's a plaza there, and just behind it was a very empty field. It had been empty for years and years and years and years and years. Nothing had been built there except a fire hall, which was put up as the west side of Waterloo continued to expand. And this land sat there for a long time. It had been approved for building years before in kind of the whole hub idea that Waterloo has at major intersections like that. And the plan was for several apartment buildings. And finally, it came to a point where it made economic sense for the people who owned that land to put those buildings up. And the neighbors behind them, and I'm sympathetic to the surprise that they felt when they saw the plans for this. Oh my goodness, look at all these apartment buildings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why isn't there a public meeting on this? Well, the reality is that the developers were following the script that had been put in place originally. They weren't asking for any changes, which is unusual in itself. Usually those development proposals end up with more than a few requests for changes, including we want to build, bigger units, more units. And in exchange for that, they sometimes offer payments to reserve funds, et cetera, et cetera. There's a variety of different things that go on. But this is one of those rare situations where the developer wasn't asking for anything extra. So there's no rule in there that says that you have to have a public meeting at that point. One of the other issues that's out there is that all councils have a system of notification when changes are being made. So it may be we will contact everybody within a couple of 100 meters of the proposed zoning change. But that can leave some people out. Go to some areas of town, like Colonial Acres is a great example, where if you go 200 meters in any direction from one property, you may not be hitting that many properties. However, if you go into some areas, in the newer areas of town, whether it's Kitchener or Waterloo, and houses are packed much more tightly together, that 200-meter radius brings in considerably more people. Where did the 200 meters come from? Don't know. No idea. But this is back now, I would say, on the desk of the Municipal Affairs Minister, Steve Clark, who is either going to say, yes, consultation has been fine, or no, we need to have some more. And as the lawyer has said, perhaps it ends up in court. It's an interesting time to be in Cambridge. Remember now, we are simply a year away, less than a year away now, from our municipal elections, which will be held in October of next year. So the clock is starting to tick, and I get a number of emails and some notes on Twitter about the whole Blair project, et cetera, et cetera. And to be perfectly honest, some of the emailers, not all that convinced by the mayor. We'll see how this plays out over the next little while.